And that's it. That's all I had to say for now. Peter, I hand you over to Peter Scott.
Thank you very much, Mike. Well, good morning, everybody. What an amazing group to see so many people here to come and listen to my talk today. Thank you very much for coming along, and also thank you for laying on such an amazing view. I think I'm stood on the stage here, and absolutely superb view. I'm also told that we're streaming, so live is going to have to be live to people at home. So a very warm welcome to everybody at home as well. I hope you enjoy my talk. So, as I say, my name is Peter Scott, local magistrate, also known as the Justice of the Peace. My talk is actually, as you can see on the screen there, a day in the life of a local magistrate. I'm just wondering now whether there's so many of you because you're interested in what goes on because of other connections with the courtroom. I'm going to take you through, if you like, the whole process with regards to being a magistrate, what it involves, the process of being appointed, right the way through to what goes on in the courtroom and what goes on behind the retiring room door, and so on, right through to the end. Now, I welcome questions as we go, because sometimes a question you have might be a bit of a vehicle to get something else going with regards to clearing up other matters. But if you don't want to ask as we're going through, I'm more than happy at the end there is a question and answers, so we can actually just go through and clear anything up if anybody got any questions with regards to what I'm talking about. So I'm guessing everybody can actually hear me okay, and they can hear me okay at home. That's good. We've got the nod there. So let's make a move and just see what we're going to talk about. So first of all, I've got a slide here which talks a bit about me, and it's not because I want to talk about me. In fact, far from it really. It's really just to pick up on the thread with regards to what a local magistrate is and the importance of actually knowing what's going on in your area. And that's the bit that is really important when you're sat in court making judgments about other people's futures, potentially changing their future and their life forever as a result of some of the decisions that are made in court. It's so important you do know exactly what is going on in the area. So just a quick rundown with regards to my sort of involvement in the community, if you like, and the community is probably the link there. So I'm in the world of IT, or I've worked in the world of IT for many years as an IT and business consultant, and I've worked in the public sector and for a national IT company before I actually became a self-employed IT consultant. So that's the work bit. When you're a busy person, most of you will know, as a busy person, you get asked to come along and do other things. And being a magistrate seems to just draw a little bit more with regards to that. So I've previously been the chairman of St John Ambulance and the Parkinson's Society, which again, it's one of those things where you're getting drawn because they like the idea that you can perhaps bring something to those type of groups. RAF Air Cadets, the Air Training Corps as it was originally called, it's now called RAF Air Cadets, and I've been a member of that for 46 years, and I still belong to that now in one of the Exmouth squadrons, and make a contribution to that on often a twice weekly basis, plus other events and so on. As a result of being a member of the Air Cadets, I then get involved in community events, running events, marshalling, safety of marshalling. So the Exeter Marathons, Torbay Marathons and so on, as a result of my involvement there. And of course, the old favourite, the fact you get invited to become a member of a school governing board. Now, as I said, it's not because I want to talk about that, but what happens as a result of belonging to that range of things is that you get to know what is going on in the community. And when you're in court, one of the things that's important is actually knowing what is going on. Knowing if there's some difficulties in certain areas, it just gives you a better knowledge with regards to how you're actually going to deal with somebody when they come into court. So let's have a look and see then with regards to the qualities you need to be a good magistrate. First of all, you need to be a good character. I think it goes without saying that you cannot be making judgments on other people if you're not of good character yourself. So the first thing is that you do need to ensure that that person is actually going to be, or is of good character. Understanding communication and social awareness. So there we go. That's the bit where we're linking into what's going on in the real world. We often hear, don't we, sometimes that our MPs are out of touch with what's going on in the real world. And when we're actually in court, because it's local justice in the local magistrates' courts, it is important to know what is going on in that real world. So when you're dealing with people, you can actually deal with them fairly. Maturity and sound temperament and sound judgment, commitment and reliability. So that's the other thing that is important as far as being a magistrate is concerned. We get given a rota of when we're actually going to be sitting in court. Right, and bearing in mind that it's not a paid role, it's a public role that we actually play, which is unpaid. But the importance is that you get given dates when you're going to be sitting in court. It's so important you're there, because you've got lots of other things lined up for a courtroom. You've got trials, you've got various hearings and so on. It's important that you're actually going to be reliable to actually get into the courtroom when you need to be there. So that's a list, if you like, of the qualities that are actually required. And I think that's the important thing. So you gain experience. I've been a magistrate for 20 years, and you gain experience in how to deal with things simply as a result of dealing with different cases. But knowing what's going on and having that knowledge of what's going on in your area also really helps with regards to how you're actually going to deal with different situations. I always just put this slide up just to actually just bring a little perspective with regards to what who can actually be a magistrate. And basically, you can see a list of some pictures of all sorts of people from different walks of life, and we've got the green thumb there just saying that basically anybody can be a magistrate. Many years ago, we're going back a long time ago now. When you were appointed as a magistrate, you were normally a landowner, or you were connected with something to do with land or whatever, and you were normally recommended to become a magistrate as a result of somebody else that was already in that line. But for a long time now, anybody can make application to become a magistrate between the age of 18 and 75. It used to be 70, it's now 75. And during that whole age range, you can become a magistrate. Any walk of life, as you see there, that is just clearly pointing out that any walk of life. Obviously, you've got to be a good character, and you obviously can't be directly connected with certain jobs that might have a conflict with regards to what's going on in the courtroom and so on, as you can well imagine. So it's open actually to everybody. So let's just have a look at the process and with regards to the appointment of becoming a magistrate. So you make an application, and the very first thing you have to do is go and sit in the public gallery and actually watch half a day of cases or a couple of half days of cases to see whether it's actually for you. And sometimes we have people come into the courtroom and they sit in the public gallery thinking that they might like the idea of becoming a magistrate. And after actually seeing the cases and some of the decisions that we've actually got to make, we talk to them afterwards and they say, I don't think I could make those decisions. I really wouldn't know exactly what direction to go in to make those decisions. It's not for me. So quite clearly, it's important that you do get the chance to go into the public gallery. Anybody can go into the public gallery. Those of you who might have any interest, if you're not aware, you can go into the public gallery of a courtroom and actually watch cases in the magistrates' court and also in the Crown Court. And it can actually be quite interesting. When we used to have courtrooms in Honiton and Cullompton, we used to get people come in from the code for a couple of hours and sit and watch what was going on, have a cup of coffee, and then go on their way again. And in the meantime, they learned a little bit with regards to what was going on with some of the people that were actually appearing in court. So the first thing is you need to do some observations. Then you make your application, and then the consideration, there's a number of factors. We need to try and get a balance of just about everything you can on any single bench. So a bench can be made up of the age range. We need to try and get a balance with age range. We've got difficulty getting younger people to become magistrates. And some of the reasons for that is quite simply because public service like this is no longer recognised in the way that it used to be years ago for employers giving people time to go off and do that public duty. So there's an act called the Justice of the Peace Act that says that an employer has to let you go off and perform a public duty like this. So they can't stop you from doing it, but what they can do, of course, is actually stop your pay. All right, and they might make things a little bit more difficult for you and so on. So back when I became a magistrate 20 years ago, I was working for a national IT company, And the chief executive at the time was delighted, proud, the fact that he had somebody in his in employment that was actually a magistrate. And he was very proud to go and tell people the fact that he's actually got somebody, and he was prepared to give me whatever time was needed to go off and go to meetings or sit in court or whatever. Happy to do that, but sadly that's not the case these days. So that does put a lot of people off, and it certainly puts the younger people off with regards to becoming a magistrate. And of course, we always need to start feeding in from the bottom to actually get people to get their experience and so on. Now, just on the subject of the age, we don't see many 18-year-olds become magistrates, or if they do, they don't stay for very long. They tend to come in because they're actually looking at perhaps going into law or whatever, but they don't tend to stay very long. And one of the general concerns that you might sort of think about with that is obviously at the age of 18, have they got enough worldwide experience to actually apply some of the things that are actually required of them when they're actually making decisions in the courtroom? Now, I know we've got to be careful of the fact that everybody should be given that chance, and you hope the fact that they're going to be sat with other experienced magistrates that are actually going to help with that decision-making process and so on. But it is difficult. I know certainly up the country, there's been a number of places where they've had some 18-year-olds come in and so on. But like I said, they do tend to move on once they've perhaps moved into another area. So you make your application. So we don't want too many retired people. Right? We don't, that happens by default, doesn't it? So people get to an age and then they're retiring, but they're still a member of the bench. We've got too many retired people. We don't too many doctors, too many vicars. We want a spread across the board to get what we call a nice balanced bench. So we get the male-female thing. That's often, at the moment, we've got more females in the North and East Devon bench than what we have males, but that tends to flip around just depending on the applications and so on. But the idea is to have a nice range of people that are on the bench, so that when you have three lay magistrates sitting together, then you get a balance, which then obviously contributes to fair justice. So you make your application, you go for a series of interviews. Now the interviews are quite interesting because the idea behind the interview is just to bring out all the different ideas. So you get told at the beginning there is no right or wrong answers. And that's exactly the same in the courtroom. Now, there's no right or wrong answers. It's the evidence that you're actually hearing in the courtroom that you then make decisions on. So, and then you make a decision and then come to a decision with regards to what you're going to do next. So the right or wrong answers is actually where you believe something should be. So during the interview process, you might be asked with regards to what you feel should happen under this circumstance. Somebody's done this, theft from a shop, they've done whatever else. And just to get an idea as to where you think something should go. You could be in the send them all to prison camp, or you could be just let them all go on their way and tell them not to do it again. That's obviously the same. That's what we're all like as individuals. So in the courtroom, we get a sentencing guideline book, which actually keeps you on track with regards to the things that you should be considering. But at the end of the day, it's the actual decision is made between the three magistrates. So during that interview process, that's the type of things that actually take place. Recommendation goes to the Lord Chancellor, and then eventually, if you are successful, you will be appointed. That process takes about 12 months. The whole process takes 12 months. So right away, you can just get the feel of the fact that there's a lot to be done in advance of knowing people are retiring or moving away, to make sure that you maintain the numbers. It's about a 12-month process to go through the whole thing. Just want to quickly look at the oath of allegiance and the judicial oath. This is the formal part of becoming appointed as a magistrate. So you get sworn in as a magistrate, and then you're normally sworn in by the Lord Lieutenant or a representative of His Majesty the King. In my case, of course, 20 years ago, my oath of allegiance was, I do swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen, Elizabeth II, or her successors according to law. Now, that was a very special day for me back 20 years ago, because it makes you realise exactly what you're signing up to, what you're committing to, and how important it is what you're doing. Now, part of my role as a magistrate, I actually swear in all the new police officers for Devon and Cornwall Police. So I was there on Monday swearing in some police officers that were transferring from other police forces. And actually tomorrow I'm at Middlemore again and I'm swearing in 22 new police officers. And when I'm talking to the police officers after they've gone through the formal bit, I then just go through and talk about some of the words they've actually spoken and used as a part of what they call the attestation. And I just point out to them how important, what are you committing to? You know, you're promising to do this, you're promising to do that. And that is so important to get that message across to anybody who's actually signing up for something like this. Join the services and so on, you obviously take an oath in that as well. So I just always like to recognise the importance of the oath, because the next stage is when you're in the courtroom, again, that's a very formal place to be. And from my perspective, that's how it needs to remain. The courtroom is a very formal place and it needs to be treated accordingly. Because as soon as you start watering things down, then you actually lose the recognition of why somebody is actually in the courtroom in the first place. So I just wanted to put that one up there just to explain to you with regards to the oath and some of the words that are actually spoken and the commitment you're actually making when you become a magistrate. So what have we got in the north and east area? We've only got two courtrooms now. We've got one at the Exeter Combined Court and Crown Court, which is in Southern A Gardens. So that contains the Crown Court and it contains the Magistrates Court. Some of you might remember the Magistrates Court used to be a part of the Headley Road Police Station, it used to be on the end of the police station. But that's for a number of years now, that's actually moved into the Combined Court in Southern A. And then the other one is actually at Barnstable Civic Centre, what was Barnstable Civic Centre. If you know, Barnstable Civic Centre is now completely flattened, but actually the police station, or the Oak Police Station, is still standing, boarded up, and next to it is the courtroom, which is actually still up and running and will remain so, and that's got two courtrooms there. So we've got two courtrooms in the Barnstable one, we've got 2 or 3 available to us in the multi-use courtrooms as a part of the Exeter Combined Court in Exeter. Now, years ago, I made reference earlier on to the fact that we used to have courtrooms in Exmouth, and Cullompton, and Oniton, and Tiverton, and so on, because that was seen to be local justice. And then slowly they closed those places down, and it now means that we've only got one in Exeter and Barnstable. Up in North Devon, we used to have them in Bideford and all the other surrounding areas up there. Now, the issue we've got there is that transport-wise, it's difficult for some people to actually make it to the courtroom in time for a court appearance, because they can't get in from the countryside into the court. Like just before they started closing these courtrooms down, they did actually say how important local justice was, and the fact that it was really, you know, it was a part of the fact that we needed to give everybody that was a court user, for whatever reason, whether you're actually going as a defendant or you're going there as a witness, that you had good access to those services. Now, I'm sure in due course somebody's going to come up with this wonderful idea. Why don't we have a courtroom in Exeter, in Exmouth, and why don't we have a courtroom in Oniton? I'm sure it might go full circle eventually. But we do really have a difficulty with the fact that we've got people that don't have their own car, and therefore they're relying on a bus service to come in from the countryside into the courtroom. And sometimes it means that we've got to make sure they're listed in court for late morning or perhaps an afternoon sitting, simply because they can't get there. Not their fault, and it's not right that anybody that's appearing in court for whatever reason, they still need to be treated fairly. And that's something that is causing us some problems with regards to listing people to come into some of the courtrooms. So let's have a look and see what goes on in the Magistrates Court then. Now this is quite an interesting one, because it gives you a breakdown with regards to exactly what the numbers sort of look like. So first of all, the first bullet there is all criminal cases start out in the Magistrates Court. So most people do sort of know that, but they're not quite clear as to why that is. It doesn't matter whether you're going in for theft of a chocolate bar from the corner shop, whether you're going in for a serious assault down the high street, or if you're going into court for murder, everybody starts in the magistrate's court. Does anybody know why that is the case? Anybody know why they start in the magistrate's court? So everybody starts in the magistrate's court because A, it's how you enter the judicial system. You come into before a magistrate before you go anywhere else. But secondly, and most importantly, is to do with bail. Are you going to be given bail, or are you going to be remanded in custody? And only a magistrate can make that decision. So if you're coming in for murder, you often hear that somebody's appearing at Exeter Magistrates Court on Monday morning or Saturday morning, because we hold what we call remand courts on a Saturday. They were arrested, they've been charged, they're appearing in court, and then you hear, and they will be appearing in the Crown Court a few days later, or a week or so later, depending on the circumstances. So the reason for that is that they come into the magistrate's court, that enters them into the court system, and then the decision is made whether they're going to be given bail or whether they're going to be remanded in custody. And then once that decision is made, they then get sent to the Crown Court. If it's a serious case, they get sent to the Crown Court, then for the actual, the process, if you like, to follow when they actually get to the Crown Court. So when we look at that, we got 97%, and this figure changes on a yearly basis. So sometimes it can be 95% of cases, and sometimes it can be 98% of cases. So around the average, about 97% of cases, they come to the magistrate's court and they stay in the magistrate's court. And only 3, 4, 5% actually goes to the Crown Court to be actually heard. And that's often not sort of understood as well, the fact that the majority of cases actually stay in the magistrate's court, a very small percentage will go up. Now, obviously, the serious ones have to go up because they can't be heard in the magistrate's court. And as an individual, depending on the offence, if you've stolen a Kit Kat, then it has to be heard in the magistrate's court. But if you put in a shop window, you get a choice. You can decide, do you want your case to be heard in the magistrate's court, or do you want your 15 minutes of fame in front of judge and jury in the Crown Court? Right, that's a decision that you can make. So the magistrates can also make that decision. They can say that we're happy to take jurisdiction of the case, but you might say, I want to go to Crown Court, in which case you go in front of a judge and jury. At the same time, you get reminded that when you go to the Crown Court, then the punishment you receive at the Crown Court could be greater than what you actually receive in the magistrate's court. And that's because the judge's powers are greater than the magistrate's court. Okay, but that's a decision that actually can be made. But the majority of cases stay in the magistrate's court, mainly because people are happy with the fact that they're going to get the actual case dealt with quickly and promptly. And obviously, if you're going to the magistrate's court and you're pleading guilty, then there's no issue anyway. Normally, it will get progressed very quickly. If you plead not guilty, then obviously we've got to have a trial. And that's the other thing that people are often not clear on. You hear about, you see the television programme Crown Court. I'm sure a lot of you have actually watched that. But the trials are also held in the magistrate's court. Lots of people believe that you just go to court for processing things, but actually every day magistrates' courts are actually hearing trials, and some trials will run for half a day, a full day, a couple of days, and those magistrates are actually involved in that process as well. It's not just the Crown Court actually holding trials. As I said, then the small percentage actually go to the Crown Court, and that's how that actual process actually works. So, as I said just now, we've got the magistrates normally sit as a bench of 3 called lay magistrates, because obviously they're unpaid. Why do we sit as a bench of 3? Fairly obvious. We're bound to make a decision, aren't we?
Yeah.
Right, you always got a majority. Okay. Now we don't always sit as a bench of 3. We can sit as a single magistrate and also a bench of 2 for certain things. But if we were sitting on a trial, then we would always sit with a bench of 3, because then you have no issue with regards to that making that decision. It would always be a majority. So three magistrates would be sitting under those circumstances. And obviously that keeps that one nice and clear. What do we deal with? Well, having explained at the beginning the fact that we obviously start with all cases that come into the court system, well then we actually deal with a wide range of offences that come into the courtroom. There's a little list there of things, careless driving, speeding, excess alcohol are regular things, if you like, that we actually see in the courtroom. And then assault and so on. So anything that the CPS are bringing, obviously, is going to come before us, depending on what it is, depends on whether it would go to the Crown Court, but the majority of things we will actually deal with in the Magistrates Court. So a wide range of criminal cases and so on coming into the court. We also have other agencies that actually bring stuff into court. Environment Agency, perhaps a good example. The County Council will bring cases into court. County Council perhaps would say a utility company is been digging up the pavement and they've not put proper cones down, protected the hole in the ground, put tap boards around the outside and that type of thing. Then the County Council would actually bring a case to court to a gas company, electricity company, or whatever. And what happens in those cases is that we actually have a professional advisor that comes in to advise us on the law regarding what the requirements are. And those are often quite interesting because obviously we deal a lot with all the crime stuff, and that's our sort of bread and butter, if you like, dealing with that on a daily basis. But when we get something that comes in as an external thing, or the Environment Agency will come in and let's say there's a floodplain somewhere and somebody's got a piece of land, they need to maintain the drainage, they need to maintain the grooves to stop any rubbish going down into the water streams and so on. So we occasionally get the Environment Agency coming in and actually prosecuting somebody, a landowner or whatever, for not maintaining those type of things on their land. And those are very interesting. Like I said, you get given all the facts with regards to what they should be doing, and then of course our job is to make the decisions with regards to what we actually sort of do once we're actually given the information. We also get involved in signing warrants. And warrants can be for the police, or it can be for the mental health services and so on. And again, it's quite another quite an interesting one. And just an interesting point there. I've just made a little note there saying in court and at home. So during the daytime, we might get a call from the police to say that they need an urgent warrant to be issued, and a warrant can only be issued by a magistrate. So they come to the court. They find a slot in the day in the court, and they go through a process with regards to getting the warrant. So the police officer comes in, explains why they want the warrant, takes us through. We ask them questions as to why it's so important, why it's so urgent, why it needs to be done in this particular way. I just put a little bit with regards to home because it's something that I actually say to the police officers after I've sworn them in. So if the requirement for a warrant was 3 o'clock in the morning, that means that they've got to come to a magistrate's house for a warrant to be issued. And what I say to them is this: one of the words that's actually said by the police officer in their oath is integrity. And there's a quote by C.S. Lewis that says, "Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching." So what I say to them is this: I get a phone call to say, police officer needs to come to my house 3 o'clock in the morning for an urgent warrant, or it might be a mental health consultant or whatever it might be. They come to my house, I could easily put the kettle on, cup of tea, in they come, sign it up, and drink a cup of tea, and we're done. But my integrity, which remains the same as what a police officer is signed up to, is to say at 3 o'clock in the morning when they come to my house, I need to identify them with their warrant card. I need to get them to take an oath or affirmation in my dining room. I need to sit down and get them to explain to me why do they want the warrant? Why is it so important that I'm going to sign a warrant that says that they can put somebody's front door in, or they can force their way in, or whatever it might be, and break somebody else's liberty? I'll ask them some questions. If I'm satisfied, I will sign the warrant. And then we'll have a cup of tea and I will wish them well as they go on their way. That's my integrity, doing the right thing even when no one is watching. That's what goes on in the daytime in the courtroom, and that's what needs to go on when no one else is watching. And the reason I say that is because it's so important for police officers to understand but they will be in that situation for lots of different reasons. When they're on duty, 3 o'clock in the morning somewhere, they still need to have that integrity. And that's what you're signing up to as a part of the oath, the fact that you're committing that you will, under all circumstances, follow things in that way. So that's the warrants, and as I say, lots of other little things that go on in the background in the courtroom as well. But that's like the sort of key things that go on during the course of a day. So I always like this slide, because top left there we've got a crime is committed. Top right we've got somebody is arrested. Bottom right we've got somebody's taken to custody and they're charged. And then bottom left is they're sent to court for a plea to be taken at the court. If only it was that easy. If only if it was that easy. We stumble, don't we? We stumble on a number of these bits here. We stumble on the first bit of actually getting somebody arrested, getting them processed, and then eventually getting them into the courtroom. But that's how the process works, and that's how it works when it's working well. And that's an important part of the process. And obviously that's what they're trying to get speedy justice, because that is so important as well, keeping people hanging around. And by golly, have we heard in the news this week how long people have been waiting for things to be actually dealt with? It really is not good, and it's not good for anybody. It's not good for the defendant. It's not good for the witnesses. Witnesses are as fearful when they come into the courtroom as anybody else. It's not good for anybody. And of course, at the same time, when we've got these type of things going on, the longer it takes to get into the courtroom, people's memories go. They can't remember exactly the fine detail. And what does that do? It starts to break down the case. It starts to diminish the fact of, do we have sufficient evidence here? Do we have good evidence that we're satisfied with regards to what's going on? And of course, yes, at the time there were some statements taken, but of course we always rely on live information as well. And it's that live witness information that helps towards actually making a decision in the courtroom. So we actually end up in the courtroom, and the defendant appears in court, and he gets the choice of pleading guilty or not guilty. And then you can possibly see there, if they plead guilty, they will be sentenced. If they plead not guilty, a trial will follow, and the court will have to decide on their guilt. So the first bit there then, so if they plead guilty, they will be sentenced. So you come into court, and you've stolen a Kit Kat from the local corner shop. So you come in, you plead guilty. So as long as there's no other complications going on, we would then go on and sentence it. For stealing a Kit Kat, you're going to get a fine and going to pay the costs and so on. Probably a nice, simple one. But if it's a different type of offence, if it's something that's got some added complications, then whilst we might be in a position to say that we're going to sentence today, we might also want some more information. And we would particularly be interested if it's a complete out of character thing for somebody to do something. And if they've done something like that, we would want the probation service to actually talk to that individual, just to find out what's going on. Is there a little blip that's gone in their life that's actually caused something to happen, whatever they've done? Because that's important as well, because that's being fair to people. And that's important. So I'm not a soft judge by any means. I used to walk into the retiring room in Exeter years ago, and the legal advisor would see me coming, oh, good morning, Mr. Scott. The prison van's all lined up outside. I say, what are you suggesting? So I'm not soft by any means, but you must be fair. It's so important to be fair. And often they talk to people that come out of the courtroom, they do like a little survey, come out of the courtroom. And people that have actually been found guilty of something, or pleaded guilty of whatever, the survey normally reflects the fact that they say they've been treated fairly. And that's so important. They might have done wrong, but they need to be treated fairly. Sometimes we get people come into the courtroom and they don't think we're going to give them a chance to speak. So they're not being represented. So they come into the courtroom and they're stood and they're trying to, and they're listening to what's going on, and they're trying to interrupt or, no, that's wrong. We just say to them, no, this is what we're going to do. The prosecutor is going to talk to start with, and then we're going to hear different things, and then you will have an opportunity to tell us exactly your side of the story. What we often find is at the end of that hearing, those individuals will say, thank you. I didn't realise that I was going to have the chance to speak. I thought all these people were going to be talking about me, and then you were just going to be making decisions. I didn't realise I was going to have the opportunity to speak. And as a magistrate sat on the bench, it is so important that we are watching what's going on in the courtroom and making sure that everybody, all court users, whether it's the defendant, whether it's the prosecutor or the defence solicitor, if they're being represented or whatever, we make sure that everybody is getting that fair contribution, because that is so important to make sure that you actually have fair justice. So if they plead guilty, then obviously we can process things. If they plead not guilty, as I said just now, we need to have a trial. And then obviously the decision will be made then, is the trial going to be held in the magistrate's court, or is the trial going to be heard in the Crown Court? And then we explain the ins and outs as to what choices and so on you've got. And then obviously a trial date is then set up. And then obviously all the evidence and so on is gathered, witnesses are gathered, a date is set and so on. Now, the fine system or the punishment system, if you like, that's actually built into our guidelines, make it clear that if you, what they call plead guilty at the earliest opportunity, then you will get a discount, that's the word used, you'll get a discount on your punishment. So your discount would be a lesser fine than if you had maintained the fact that you were not guilty and then you were found guilty. And then we knock a percentage off of that system. So if it's a fine, we would reduce the fine down. If it's some other type of punishment, we reduce that punishment down because they pleaded guilty at the early opportunity. And when you're being defended, when a defence solicitor is there, they would explain the fact that my client pleaded guilty at the earliest opportunity and they cooperated with the police with their inquiries, because that then gives us the picture with regards to what we're actually dealing with, and it means we will actually obviously deal accordingly. And the reason why the decision was made a long time ago with regards to giving a discount for things is because if somebody realises, put your hands up and plead guilty, it saves having a trial, it saves calling witnesses and putting them through the trauma of coming into court and being a witness and so on. It saves so much and actually just gets the thing out of the way. And sometimes, you know, the defence solicitor will be talking to somebody saying that they're pleading not guilty. They have a little chat with them and say, well, the police have got body-worn video and there's CCTV cameras seeing you put the brick through the window. Right? So what do you think we're going to do here? Let's plead guilty, because then you'll be dealt with, and B, you won't be putting everybody through that process. So my advice to you all is, if you pinch a Kit Kat from the local store, right, make sure hands up, plead guilty at the earliest opportunity. You will get a discount on what your punishment is. Okay. Right. What goes on behind the retirement room door? Now, years ago, we used to have cake, tea, coffee, all sorts of different things. But these days, we struggle to even have a decent cup of tea. And certainly there is no biscuits or anything like that. Those days are gone. The only way you're going to get that is if you bring it in yourself. But so in the retiring room, so two things really. In the courtroom, you would often see, if you've been into the courtroom anywhere, only in a magistrate's court, you would see the three magistrates just push their chairs back to actually talk to each other and just talk through something we've just heard to make a decision. If that decision needs a lot more discussion, then we retire out to the retiring room so the three of us can actually talk about the case and what we've just heard. So sometimes it can just be, are we happy with making a decision like this? Yes, we are, in which case then the pronouncement can be made. And if not, we will go to the retiring room. Back in the retiring room, of course, we also read reports. If there's reports from the probation service or reports from a GP or reports from social services, whatever it might be, we will go into the retiring room and read those reports to make sure that we've got all the information backed up by what we've actually heard by the witnesses in the courtroom to actually make a decision. So back in the retiring room, there are all sorts of things going on with regards to making sure that the full picture is obtained. Or when we've concluded a case, and we actually find somebody guilty, then we're going to sit in the retiring room and work out what's the best structured method of actually dealing with the punishment. Does somebody need to be doing, probation type activities, unpaid work or whatever. We'll talk about those a little bit more in a minute. So the retiring room is actually set up there to ensure that we've actually got the three of us not being interrupted, because nobody else is involved in that decision-making process. And that's also very important to understand. So in the courtroom, you've got the legal advisor that sits in front of us, you've got the prosecutor, you've got the defence, and you've got probation, and perhaps any other court user that might be supporting somebody in court. But the important thing, as far as the decision is concerned, it's only the three magistrates that make that decision. And if we've got a point of law that needs clearing up, then we would call the legal advisor to come in and actually clear that up for us, and then they have to leave the game before we actually make our decision. So it's important we've actually got that place to actually discuss the case. A little bit now looking at what sort of things we're thinking about and what's sort of going on when we're looking at offences and cases and so on. So our sentencing guidelines, the judge's rules, if you like, give us some guidelines as to what we should be thinking about all the way through the case. So just looking at that list there, you can see we've got the more serious list. Somebody was a vulnerable victim, there was a weapon involved, group action, racially aggravated, breach of trust. On the less serious side, we've got no damage injury, it was impulsive, it was low value. And all the time, you can see just about in the background, there's a shadow of the scales of justice. And all the time, we are weighing up in your mind, you're just thinking through what you've actually heard so far, and where does that find you on the scales? Are you weighing it up on the fact that you feel that it's on the less serious side or the more serious side? Also, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, whereabouts are we with regards to the actual case? Are we in the custody threshold? Have we gone beyond the community punishment order? We're actually in the custody threshold. Or are we in a fine? Or are we in a discharge? And then we're just thinking that all the time. There's a little note there with regards to the standard of proof, beyond reasonable doubt. Those are three very powerful words, beyond reasonable doubt. When you're listening to a case and you're hearing some witnesses come up and actually give their evidence, you're thinking about all the time, are you satisfied beyond reasonable doubt? Because if you turn it around the other way, if you're not satisfied beyond reasonable doubt, then you would be finding somebody not guilty, or you would be throwing the case out, dismissing the case. And that balance, that beyond reasonable doubt, is a very strong test. The other test that you have in the civil court, most of you have heard this one, balance of probability. On balance, the balance of probability is a far lighter test. So we do actually use balance of probability on certain bits of what we do in the courtroom, but not for the actual criminal part of the case. But in the civil courts and so on, you go to a small claims court for something or other, on the balance of probability. You've only got to play those words over. On balance, do you think this happened? Well, it probably did. Balance of probability. When you look at the standard of proof beyond reasonable doubt, if you've got an element of doubt in what you've heard with regards to convicting that person, that's when you've got to say, I'm not satisfied beyond reasonable doubt. And sometimes you could be sat in the courtroom. I've been sat in the courtroom before, and I've actually been listening to a case, and you're waiting. You've sort of almost got there with regards to the fact you're satisfied that this person is guilty. And you're just waiting for just that tiny little bit of extra bit of information that's actually going to come to you from the prosecutor to satisfy you beyond reasonable doubt. And if it doesn't come, you're going to have to find somebody not guilty. Yeah. The last person you hear talking in the case is the defence solicitor. And the defence solicitor would, of course, stand there and say this and that about his client. That's what he's paid to do. And then you retire to consider the case. And sometimes we will get to the retiring room and you're saying, I was good all the way through there. Witness number one, witness number two. Then this policeman came in, he gave his evidence. I was good, the fact that, I'm satisfied that that person is guilty. And then you hear something else that just puts a little balance on it again, and you're not that sure. And you get to the retiring room, and the other thing that goes on in the retiring room is we all test what we've actually heard. So sometimes my colleagues will say, well, I was fine, I was absolutely guilty until that little chink of information came out. And then somebody else will say, but that person, that witness, gave this information. And at the end of that, I was satisfied. So I'm happy that person is guilty. I'm sticking with it. 3 magistrates. At the end of the day, all 3 of you have got to agree. So you're either guilty or not guilty. And then out of the 3 of you, you've got the answer. And it's based on the fact of 3 people actually hearing that and then making that decision. But of course, what you are doing, and obviously what we're trained to do, is to bear in mind beyond reasonable doubt. So if there is anything other than that reasonable doubt, then you would actually find somebody not guilty. And it's quite interesting. I was sat on a case a few years ago now, and I was convinced that somebody was guilty, and this tiny little bit of information didn't come out. And of course, we don't get told of anybody's previous history, their previous convictions, until we've actually made a decision. And we went off and retired, and we came back, and we decided that we were going to find this person not guilty. And then we discovered afterwards that very person is back in again in a couple of weeks' time for another 3 offences, exactly the same thing, right? And previous convictions of doing the same thing. But of course, we don't get told that when we're making the decision, right? So we're obviously making it based on the evidence in court. But what's important there is that the defence will often say, if something comes out in the courtroom, sometimes a defendant will say, so, but that's being dealt with next week when I'm in court. Right? We're obviously not meant to hear that, because obviously you're not meant to hear those type of things. Often the defence barrister will look at it and say, you're an experienced bench, I know you can put that out of your mind with regards to your decision. And you can. I can tell you now you can, because obviously we do get people coming to court that we've seen in court before, what we might call our regular attenders. And you see them in court, you know, but your brain is trained to listen to the evidence today. And I know my friends sometimes sort of pick me up on things because they'll say, oh, so happened. I said, well, sure about that. You weren't there. You don't know exactly that. You base it on the evidence you're actually hearing today. And it does actually train your brain in a certain way to make sure that you're listening to today's evidence. You're not bringing into the equation that you saw them 3 weeks ago or anything like that. What are we still looking at today? And that's the important bit. So that's what we're running through. And then we go on and look at a little bit more then with regards to the sentence in terms of its culpability and its harm. Culpability, intention. Did somebody go out intentionally, or was it reckless, right? Or negligence? Was the harm to individuals, to a community? So graffiti, good example, going out, spraying graffiti in the area. It can upset lots of people. It can cause problems to a lot of people. So therefore, you've got those other things built into it. And then we do a balance then with regards to the culpability and harm and so on to see where we actually fall at the end of that little process. And then we are looking at the offender. So on the more serious side, you've got somebody that's got a previous record, lack of remorse. Now, bearing in mind, we've made a decision, obviously, at this stage. They've either pleaded guilty, so therefore we know their previous record, or we found them guilty, and then we get to know their previous record. Lack of remorse, right? Offences whilst on bail. Obviously, that's another one that's quite significant. If somebody's on bail for another offence and they've committed an offence, that makes it more serious. On the other side, remorse, cooperation, early guilty plea, prompt guilty plea, and previously of good character. And again, that's something else that we've got to bear in mind. Somebody's never been in the courtroom before, and we do see it sometimes. Somebody's ended up in court because of a little blip in their life. You can tell by their remorse you're not going to see them again. I mean, I can assure you, we recognise crocodile tears every time, without any doubt at all. You can tell when somebody says you're never going to see me again, because whatever it was that went on, you can just tell, and that's important as well. And that's a part of actually understanding what you're dealing with and the fact you're dealing with people. Down the bottom, do we still need to know more? Where are we going to go with things and so on? So that's when you're then considering whether you need to have the probation service to interview the individual, find out what's been going on in their life. Has there something been going on that potentially could have caused it? Obviously, not necessarily an excuse, but it gives us more information as to perhaps how we're actually going to deal with something. Just a couple more slides just to finish off then. So the intention of the punishment, the sentencing, is it a punishment? Is it for protection of public, reparation, whatever? We've just got to think about what we're actually doing here. What's going to be the best action to make sure that we're not going to allow that individual to start getting involved in that type of thing again. So the orders that we can actually give, they change all the time, but basically the probation service offer us lots of different things that we can. Oh, it's got a bit funny, isn't it? It's not funny on my screen as well. But basically, under that list there, we've got supervision orders, we've got anger management courses, we've got unpaid work, we've got tagging and so on. And obviously tagging has become quite effective now. You've got GPS tagging and so on, so you can actually track where people are and so on. So that's quite a good one. You can't tag somebody to stay at home if you've got a house full of other people that are going to suffer as a result of that individual being in the house. So it's important that you look at the case and make sure that if you are going to give somebody a curfew and tag them, that it's going to work with everybody else who's in the house, right? Because that might just cause the rest of the family problems. So it's not always the answer, but it does work well. Years ago, if you were on a curfew order, it relied on the policeman knocking on your front door, checking to see whether you're at home or not. Obviously, these days now we have the technology. You've got the tag on the ankle and so on. And obviously, if you're not at home, then the monitoring company actually know you're not at home and can tell the police anyway. So those type of things work. Unpaid work. A lot of you will probably say unpaid work, it doesn't really work. They turn up and they get away with it and they just pottered around. I can assure you now that unpaid work has changed a fair bit. And if you're given an unpaid work order and turn up and you don't do your contribution, it will just get sent straight back to court. They'll say, you can't work with this person, don't want to get engaged, and we will give them a different punishment. When we give them a different punishment, it needs to be a stronger punishment, a higher punishment, higher up the list than what we gave them before. So again, that works. I can also tell you, funny enough, I was talking to the U3A in Exeter a few years ago, and we were in a room, similar sort of size crowd, in Methodist Church. And in the back, there was a guy in painter's overalls, a bit of a brace, and he was dotting between the pillars at the back of the church. And I thought he's really interested in what's going on here. And I was talking to the group. And afterwards, as soon as I finished, I was just talking to some of the group over coffee, and he came on to me and he said, I was given an unpaid work order 15 years ago. He said, I was silly, I went out, I caused some damage, and I did this and did that and the rest of it. He said, and I went to court, and he said, I wasn't working. And he said, they gave me an unpaid work order, and I was sent to go and do painting and decorating with a local company. I'm still here 15 years later. He said, I love it. He said, I work 7 days a week. He said, it brought me back on track. And he said, I was absolutely, I was all over the place. He said, but I love working now. He said, I still work for this company. And it really did. You giving me an unpaid work order really did. And I thought that was a really good example of a success story, if you like. And it was such a shame. I didn't realise he was bobbing around. Perhaps if he put his hand up, I would have asked him what he was inclined about. But I did manage to tell a few people afterwards. But it's always a nice one to hold on to, the fact that that was a success story. But the probation service now are very much stricter with regards to, if it doesn't work, it's the court decision to do something else about it, not for them just to try and get through, X number of unpaid work days. I think we're nearing the end now. Final slide is to do with just the youth court. It's just really to pick up on the fact that the youth court is a separate court that's held for 10 to 17-year-olds in a slightly less formal setting. You'll see there that the magistrates are not sat on the high bench, they're sat on the lower level bench. The idea there is to actually try and engage more with the youth and see whether they can actually sort things out to stop them actually continuing to, as you see there, to actually change their behaviours and attitudes. You like to think it works, and there are lots of success stories there where the right interventions and so on actually protect those sort of things. But it is a difficult one. We do sadly from time to time see youths that are in the 10 to 17 court, and then as soon as they turn 18, they appear in the adult court. But unfortunately, I say that's just the way things are. But we do like to think we can capture them in the youth court. Well, there we go. So we didn't have any questions on the way. Have we got any questions anybody would like to ask? I'm happy to talk to you all afterwards if anybody wants to have a chat afterwards. Yeah.
What's the difference between a trial in the magistrate's court and the Crown Court?
So what's the difference?
The difference between a trial in a magistrate's court and a Crown Court.
Okay, so what's the difference between a trial in a magistrate's court and a Crown Court? So the only difference is the fact that in the magistrate's court, it's 3 magistrates who are judge and jury. Right, 3 of them are hearing it and making a decision. In the Crown Court, you've got the Crown Court judge and the jury. Okay, and it's the jury that hear the case and make a decision with regards to whether they find somebody guilty or not guilty, and then the judge actually does the sentencing. So it's like split into 2 in the Crown Court with a larger group of people making that decision. In the magistrate's court, the magistrates are the judge and jury. Okay, over here.
I apologise straight away for the question, but everything you said this morning gives us great reassurance in a justice system that it works.
Yes.
How on earth can we explain what has happened with the post office in that case?
Right. Okay. So the question. So the question there is what I've said this morning sounds like the perfect solution to actually running the justice system. How can we end up in the situation that we ended up in as far as the post office is concerned, the post office work is now concerned? And that's a very, very good point. And I suppose I ought to perhaps fall back to what the Prime Minister was saying yesterday with regards to the fact that it's such an appalling case and justice needs to be done and so on and so forth. One thing that really struck me was the fact that the Crown Prosecution Service, they are very thorough with regards to what they're actually bringing into the courtroom. And they've got their own checks and balances to make sure it's in the interest of justice to do things and so on. It now turns out, only from what I've actually been listening to, obviously on all the different debates on it, is the fact that obviously the post office are allowed to bring their own prosecutions, right, into the courtroom, which just doesn't seem right in this day and age. I mean, the police used to bring their own prosecutions, and they were stopped from bringing their own prosecutions. So instead of a chief inspector coming in and presenting their own case, the Crown Prosecution Service had to do that because they were a third party. What do they say? They're not marking their own homework or whatever. So it sounds like to me, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more that comes out, and I really do hope it comes out soon. I really don't. I hope it doesn't wait until the end of the year, like they're suggesting it could well be by the end of 24 for this to be sorted for people, because it's absolutely atrocious what's actually going on. So I do feel that the fact that they're able to bring their own prosecutions has probably added towards this, because there was, and the other thing that's come out now is the fact that all the evidence that the prosecutors, the post office have brought, wasn't shared with the defence. So that, again, that's such a key thing. So the key thing is that you need to share all evidence you've got, even if it might cause the prosecution a problem. So if you've got CCTV of something, or something that proves that there is no money in somebody's bank account, so therefore they've certainly not moved into their own bank account, if that is evidence that's actually held by the prosecution, it has to be shared. It's got to be disclosed. And it turns out now, listening to the radio yesterday, that some information that was brought by the post office prosecutors was not shared with the defence side. So I can't answer any more than that, to be quite honest. It's a good question, and I can't think of anything else to say apart from the fact I'm certainly with you with regards to this. Yes.
Are there any other bodies like the government or public service bodies?
Well, it turns out now, yes, there is, because the post office obviously can do it. And it turns out now the RSPCA are allowed to bring their own prosecutions, as are a couple of other HMRC, I think it was, I heard on the radio as well. Seriously, I think it will be looked at, because it just doesn't feel right, does it? We do our utmost to make sure that everybody is given a fair chance to provide everything on both sides. And then suddenly we find that we've got people that can actually bring it to the courtroom, and that A, they're not sharing things, and B, there's no checks and balances on those individuals. And then just to top it all, this morning I hear that some of the prosecutors that were involved in the post office thing, they were getting some sort of bonus for getting the cases through. What's all that about? We're getting short of time.
Can I just say a good word for the witness service?
For the witness service, yes?
Witness service.
Yes,
Yeah, they do a super job.
they do indeed.
Yes.
somebody just said about a bit of praise for the witness service, and I fully agree. If you're a witness to anything, you can be as nervous and worried and frightened as anybody else coming into that courtroom. So having the witness service actually supporting you beforehand and then afterwards is also a very key part of what goes on in that courtroom. So yes, a very good point. Okay, oh, there's one more there.
When the police give their oath of allegiance,
Yes,
I noticed the words are, I swear by Almighty God.
yes,
I imagine many of them, perhaps the majority, are not Christian.
Right, okay.
Or there might be another
yeah.
faith.
So actually that's not the police one, that's obviously the one that I took as a magistrate. So the police one doesn't actually pick up on that, and there's also lots of variations with regards to what book you might want to attend, or you can just have an attestation. And you have that in the courtroom as well now. You can either swear on the Bible or the book of your choice, or you can actually just attest to say that the evidence you're going to give will be the truth.
And that's the same with magistrate.
And that's the same, yes it is, yes, yes it is. Yes, for those reasons. Okay, Mike, I think we're probably done, are we?
Are you going to take the more answer?
Yes, I'll talk to you, if we're going to think of whatever.
Thank you very much.